Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. I'm very glad that we had such a very good overview on the legal, on the government, on every perspective possible, and I'm happy to bring some further elements just to close this conference on the legal case, what has happened. Second, what will happen now? We have very recent updates on the case, and then 3 specific requests for the Parliament, following last week's ordinance resolutions. So, voila. I work for ADF, which is a legal organization, so a law firm protecting Christians worldwide. And we're happy to say that we're the ones supporting legally and financially Maria in the ground through our allies. So just to begin with, we have to understand Pakistani law, where marriage is a contract. And a contract requires consent, and a child cannot provide legal consent. This is not open to any kind of interpretation. Child cannot provide consent. As it was said, Maria was 13 years old, so whatever she said couldn't be taken into account. Now, what actually happened is that when the court wanted to examine her document, they decided not to do so and rather take her speech as the proper element for consideration. And normally when high courts, when they have doubts on the validity of certificates, because in this case, as it was mentioned already, what happened is that Maria's birth certificate was provided years after her birth. And the court knew this. They were like, this certificate, it wasn't done the day where she was born, therefore we cannot know when she was born. And in these cases, high courts, they have to go to the low courts, and they have to ask for the low courts to do the due diligence, the proper due diligence, to find out the validity of the papers. This was done, and the low courts, they realized that Maria was indeed 13 years old, but they not only found that, they also found, as Joseph mentioned, that the marriage certificate was fake because of the age and also because of the jurisprudence, the jurisdiction that was used in the territory, which means both of the main elements for that marriage to happen were not valid. This is on the legal side of what happened, but then indeed the law is very clear. What I wanted to highlight from what has been said is that out of the 3 powers, the government is more or less okay. Here the problem is the judiciary system. What about the courts? What if the courts don't apply the laws properly? The law is very clear. Maria was married when she was minor, and the law at the time was 16 years old. Now it's 18 years old, we welcome that very much, but she was still minor under that age. The court's job was very simple, to establish the age and then apply the law. Voila, this brings me to the element of us, and I will mention later in the concrete asks that we have for the Parliament, which is what do we do when the own court doesn't take into account their own research? What if the High Court don't consider the low court's findings? This is the main issue in this case. The problem here is that this situation, I'm being very specific because I think it's important for the clarity. And the issue is that this is not only for Maria, but it's for many other girls, as we have seen today. Another element that we have to consider is that when there is a pattern here, for sure. Girls, they live with the abductors. They say they're willingly there, of course, because they're under huge pressure from the abductor. And then as soon as they're able to escape, they say the truth, they tell the truth. They say that they were completely under pressure. And then the issue here is that the courts, they are not realizing this pattern. Another final element, as it was mentioned in the interest of time, I have more things to say, but I will be short, is that indeed the higher court, recently 2 weeks ago, they decided to rehear the case again. We did a second filing, please asking them to reconsider the low court's due diligence on the papers, saying that no, she was underage and the marriage was illegal, and they are open to reconsidering this case. So Maria's case, there's still some hope. And we hope this not only is in favor of her and her family, but also in favor of all other girls in the same situation. And then finally, 3 asks for the Parliament following last week's ordinance resolution. First, training of the judiciary. It's great to have good laws. Now we have to have good judges and courts. So the judges handling the case need to understand the coercion patterns behind the abductions of the ladies, the girls. The second one would be to have clear procedures. The courts need clear guidance on the documents that are required, and they have to stick to those guidance, not rather rely on testimonies of girls who are scared. And then the third, a consistent application of the law. If the child was underage, that's it. No other element should be taken into consideration. Thank you very much.